Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone is in a good health, and I hope you had enjoy your lunch. Hello, everyone. Hi. Can I say hi? Hello. Hello. Okay, thank you. My name is Didi Hardiana. I'm the head of UNDP Indonesia's Innovative Financing Lab, and I'll be your MC for today. It's a very an honor for me to host you this afternoon for our CEO Roundtable event brought to you by the United Nations Development Program, or UNDP. First, let me extend my warm welcome to UNDP Administrator, Mr. Achim Steiner. Thank you very much for joining us, sir, and I hope you had a fruitful 36 hours so far in Bali. Warm greetings to our key speakers, Mr. Donald Wiharja, CEO of MDI Ventures, Ms. Dita Aisyah, a co-founder and CBO of Binar Academy, and Ms. Lisa Widodo, who are joining online, the CEO of Blibli.com. And foremost to our dearest participant, thank you and welcome to our CEO Roundtable on SDGs, gig economy, and digital transformation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Our discussion today will focus on how the Indonesian entrepreneurship ecosystem, from investors to intermediaries to entrepreneurs, particularly the so-called gig economy and digitalizations, can contribute to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development Goals. Before we begin, allow me to ask you to adjust your phone mode to a silent mode. And also, please make yourself comfortable on your beanbags. We will begin today's event with an introductory remarks from UNDP Administrator, Mr. Achim Steiner, and followed by presentation from our key speakers who have experience in the landscape of digitalization in the entrepreneurship sector. Then we will invite all the participants to also join the discussions on our topics of today. And of course, we will appreciate your active contribution to deliver your insight. And at the end, we will close the event with a photo session with all the speakers and also all the participants. Without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Norimasa Simomura, a resident representative of UNDP Indonesia, who will be the moderators of today's event. The floor is yours, Pak Nori.
So, hello colleagues, good afternoon. First and foremost, thank you very much for joining us here in Bali for this very important, supposed to be informal meeting. And I'd like to also welcome my big boss, Achim Steiner, for joining us. You can see that our setup is semi-formal, semi-informal. Because Achim has been participating in G20, I've been seeing the formal setup of G20. We would never beat the G20 setup. So we said, okay. But I think this meeting is quite important because in G20, people talk very upstream policy issues. They are, of course, very important. But I think we now have to come back to reality and really talk about what's going on the ground. And you actually lead those activities. So that's why I think potentially this may be the most important meeting that you're attending of everything that you have attended. So I just wanted to take a few minutes, I can, right? Just to say, I've also attended some of the side events of the G20, listening to colleagues very carefully. And I think a majority opinion coming from the side event, private sector colleagues, is that it's about time the paradigm is shifted. The private sector plays much bigger decision-making role because investment cannot be garnered, told by the public sector where to invest, where not to invest, because asset classes, they form their own investment decisions. So a paradigm shift is really needed. And that reminded me of the time when we started talking about SDGs. I used to say that we need private sector to achieve the SDGs. This is, of course, But at the same time, I was stressing that you guys need SDGs too, because time will come that if you don't work on the SDGs, no one is going to buy the services because the consumers are going to be very, very strict about those standards. And the government regulation is going to kick in, and brown investors, brown products won't be sellable anymore. So that's why we thought I was insisting that the SDG is quite important for the private sector, for them to be viable. And speaking of private sector, obviously, here in Indonesia, him and colleagues, we all know that private sector plays a huge role. It's $1 trillion economy. And 97%, 98% of the employment is generated from MSMEs. And about 61% of GDP is produced from SME sector. So then SME and investing in the SME sector becomes tremendously important. And it's easy to imagine that these SMEs were the ones that was, affected harshest by COVID-19 pandemic, and potentially by the ongoing the impact of the global crisis, the food price, fuel price, energy price. So really, then that actually makes me think that the ongoing debate in the G20, in the DWG, Development Working Group, they're talking about the resilient recovery of the economy. And they're actually focusing on SMEs, resilient, green, inclusive recovery. And I think this is actually a very spot-on priority that the government of Indonesia as a presidency has identified. And if you look at just to share what they are working on when it comes to MSME development in the G20 sector, in fact, they've identified several entry points for MSME development. And these are not new, you probably know. They say for MSMEs to be much more resilient, we need to invest in women's empowerment, right? And then we need to make sure that we work on the formalization of small company operations. And we need to make sure that they go green, sustainable. And, let me see, they also need to be resilient to disasters, because this country is particularly disaster prone. And there are so many things that they identified, including business skills, business planning. But the last most important element they identified in G20 is that digitalization, the use of digital technology, is a key factor, enabling factor to develop the MSME in the context of resilient recovery in this country and other countries. And that brings us to today's meeting: digital, gig workers, gig economy, and SMEs. The digital economy in this country is rapidly rising, and you guys know much better than myself. Only a few years ago, the digital economy size was $44 billion, and it's actually estimated that this will rise by another 100 billion in the next couple of years, only couple of years. So, and then much of this digital economy has surged through the digital technology startups who are attending here. So you're actually the driver of the growth in this sector. And so we want to talk about the benefits of digital, and then I think digital has allowed you to take full benefit of gig workers, gig economy in a more efficient way. But as we all know that although digital technology allows you to, do a much better foresighting of the market, digital does actually allow you to study in details the trends and also zoom out and have a very good picture of the overview. Digital probably allows you to reach out to different stakeholders, communicate much more and reach out. And digital probably allows companies to adapt to changing situations very fast. So there are so many reasons you use digital, right? As a power, as a driver for MSM, your company's development. But then we also want to believe that digital contributes to promote inclusion. But then we started to ask ourselves in UNDP, is digital really inclusive? because I hear about the news, that you develop an app and you give jobs to gig workers who needs, to spend 2-3 hours getting money from you. But then, do they have a negotiation power? Are we actually promoting the workers' rights? Are we actually promoting the social protection? Which leads to another more complicated issue. It's about the commitment of the companies, commitment of the gig workers to the companies. What level of the social protection should you actually give? And then of course, it doesn't give the workers job security. So these are potential concerns that the digital economy and the gig economy is also creating for the workers. And today, I wanted to spend the next 1 hour or so inviting you to discuss exactly this. How can you actually make the best use of digital technology and promote the gig workers and gig economy in a way that is a win-win for you, for the workers, and the society at large? So this is, in a nutshell, I think, what we want to do. But without further ado, because I feel a pressure from the back that I should stop talking. Let me introduce 3 speakers to come to the podium first before we open up for a very interactive dialogue. First, I'd like to invite my boss, Mr. Achim Steiner, to come to the stage. As you know, he is the administrator of UNDP, biggest development network of United Nations system. Before joining UNDP, he was the director of Oxford Martin School of the University of Oxford. And before that, he was the UN Undersecretary General and head of UN Environment Program. And before that, you have a long history, but you were the DG of International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN. And maybe I should stop here. And 3.
Very suspicious.
Yeah. And I guess I would like to invite 2 other speakers also together. Mr. Donald Viharja. He's the CEO of MDI Ventures. His company, Telcom Corporate Venture Capital, focuses on delivering capital gains on tech investment and bridges innovation in startups with opportunities in state-owned enterprise. And then one more colleague, Ms. Dita Aisha. She is the co-founder and Chief Business Development Officer of Binar Academy, Indonesia's first learning super app for technology skills, which helps people like me, I hope, and companies to thrive in the digital era through upskilling and recruitment services. We are also joined online. Let me just introduce her. Ms. Lisa Widodo. She's the Chief Operating Officer of Bli, who is joining online, as I said. Bli, as you know, is one of Indonesia's leading e-commerce platform and recently earned the status of unicorn. Well done. Thanks for joining. So may I just invite you, Achim, to first take the floor and then inspire us.
Well, Nori, thank you. Thank you very much. And what a pleasure to see you here. And maybe I'll stand over here and then I can take the mask off. It's perhaps for a moment easier to communicate like this. First of all, let me say, walking to this room truly is a little bit of a switch of scenery. I have been spending the last 36 hours in a wonderfully hosted G20 meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors, the backbone of the G20, as you can imagine. And to walk in here and see you all sit in these beanbags, I'm not sure whether you like them or whether you're comfortable or whether you managed to get up again afterwards, but it looks very cool when you walk in. So first of all, Nori, thank you for bringing us together. Let me briefly say a couple of words. I stand before you as a very humble student, I have to say. I may lead an organization that has 22,000 staff across the world. You know, UNDP works in 170 countries. We are a large beast, and in many ways the antithesis of what maybe the stories of many of your businesses are. But what makes UNDP so interesting is that because it is spread across 170 countries, it's actually not one large organization. It is many national and nationally embedded organizations across the world. We are a knowledge network. It's not where we started 50 years ago, but we are in today's world truly a knowledge network in development. We connect people, we connect experimentation, we connect innovations, and we try to play a part in helping governments to understand how citizens, but also in the larger sense of citizens, that can mean civil society, it can mean the private sector, it can mean markets, best interact with each other in order to advance development. Not going to spend a lot of time talking about development. Everybody in Indonesia has very clear understandings of what the lack of development is and also what successes in development represent. But perhaps what is so interesting, why I was looking forward to this discussion and to listening to you today is, you know, with every generation of people, with every generation of technologies, we in a sense reshape also the way we go about development. And my own learning curve has been virtually vertical when it comes to digitalization for the last 4 years, because I was one of those, you know, passive users of cell phones and computers and everything else. And, you know, to me, as long as the interface worked for me, I didn't need to know what was behind it. I also didn't know what made it happen. And above all, I had no sense of quite how transformative digitalization would be for the future of development. Then the Secretary General asked me to co-chair with Maria Ramos, who was at that time the CEO of a major bank in South Africa, a panel on digital finance and the SDGs. And it's a report that actually, in many ways, is fascinating in the way that it traces not only the current state of thinking about digitalization and how it is likely in a very short period of time to revolutionize what is going to happen to people, to business, and to people's money. Because one of the interesting things about our financial system is that we often forget that the money that is held in institutions and increasingly concentrated in fewer and fewer institutions is actually your and my money. It's our savings, it's our pensions, and yet intermediation by banks, by fund managers, by financial institutions, by pension funds, has become so significant that we actually feel we have really no knowledge anymore on how to manage our own money. And I mention this as one simple example because that was one of the great debates we had in that panel. How do we manage to re-establish a sense of ownership between people whose money they entrust in somebody else, and that somebody else who actually is acting on their behalf, rather than us handing over the money and then being told whether we have any left or have some more at the end of a certain period. It's a very simplistic example. Where I'm heading with this is that we are in a truly revolutionary time. I'm a member of the Broadband Commission, which the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, has established, where we are focused particularly on something that is fundamental to your business. Essentially connectivity. How many people are in a position to actually access broadband? And then it's not just a matter of physical access, it's also affordability and everything else that comes with it. Well, we've only just passed the point of roughly half of humanity. So when Nori says inclusion, exclusion, in a world where digital suddenly becomes such an accelerator of access to services, access to knowledge, access to finance, if we are not careful, that other half is actually going to be left behind even more than we were in the analog period when the world also had inequalities. So this is one major issue that a development organization, that any government right now needs to obviously confront very actively. And this is not about, you know, everybody is equal and everybody will behave equally in the digital world. But if by virtue of your education or of where you live, of who you are already either in or out, with all the consequences that has, this has a tremendous explosive dimension to it. The 2030 Agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, talk about leaving no one behind. And it sounds like a very simplistic phrase, but it is perhaps the most potent test of virtually any kind of policy that we develop in our time. Look around the world even before COVID happened. We had in more and more societies people essentially stepping out of the political process and their institutions onto the street because of a frustration, a lack of trust, a frustration at being excluded, about the unfairness of the system. And this wasn't a phenomenon between poor countries or rich countries or developed or developing nations. It went from Hong Kong to Paris, to Santiago de Chile, to Washington, D.C., and in many other countries around the world. We live in a time where how societies produce benefits or create reasons for being excluded or to see yourself excluded is increasingly tearing at the fabric of our societies. And along comes digital, this extraordinary power of transforming things that might have taken you years before into an operation of a second. A couple of days ago, I was sitting in New York. My son was in London. My wife was traveling, and I was trying to organize a ticket for my son to fly. The problem was, suddenly, the airline says you must pay your ticket with the same credit card, or you must rather come to your check-in with the credit card you paid your ticket. On one cell phone, I had my wife, I had my son, and myself talking while being on the airline's website, going into my bank account in order to transfer money into his credit card so that he could pay that ticket with a credit card. And I thought, what a crazy world we live in. All of this happening on one device across the entire world, involving bank accounts, booking of tickets. And it's just, at the personal end, we experience these revolutions. Now, think for a moment what it means to be a government like Bangladesh, where UNDP has been working for the better part of a decade on something called the Access to Information Initiative, the origins of which are fascinating. One civil servant who joined the UNDP training course with our country team in Egypt, and that country course was about digital public service. And the project was to go back to your country and figure out one activity that could demonstrate whether you could actually apply what you had learned to your working context. This gentleman, I've never met him, I hope I will one day, went back and decided that one of the biggest problems for people in Bangladesh in the rural areas is that they, for virtually any government service, have to get on a bus. They have to go to the provincial capital, sometimes to the national capital, to get a land title, a birth certificate. The amount of time that people would spend to get basic things that government provides them that they need was an inordinate amount of time. And so he set up a terminal in a village where essentially you could get your birth certificate printed. It took less than 5 years for every citizen in Bangladesh to not live further than 5 miles from a terminal, where today you not only can do dozens of basically government services, they then combine this with private sector companies that can operate other offers on there, including digital finance and so on. And the story is obviously much more complex, but it was the combination of a vision of a service provider, a government that embraced that notion of creating an ecosystem in which that innovation could succeed, invested in it, and citizens who today, and we have calculated this, are literally saving billions of dollars, and this is not a joke, billions of dollars over the last 5 years in terms of time that they didn't have to invest in going sometimes for 2-3 days to a capital, paying for transport costs, bribes, etc., etc. It's a phenomenal story. Again, it's an example that I mention because when we work as UNDP today with governments, we are increasingly convinced that the challenge is really not the next mile of fiber optic. It's not even the last mile of fiber optic. The challenge really between citizens and government and the private sector, the entrepreneurial world, is to come to a common understanding of what it means to build a digital ecosystem. That ecosystem has a lot to do with technology. It has a lot to do with regulatory frameworks, but it also has to do with, for example, introducing in education already curricula that allow school leavers to enter that new digital economy of possibility with the actual skill set that they can operate within it. Because that is happening. If you're in a private education, you're far more likely to have seen a computer at the age of 12 today or 10 than if you're maybe in a public school. But also to begin to ask some more fundamental questions, and this is another piece of work that our current Secretary General commissioned a few years ago, the Digital Cooperation Panel, where one of the most interesting recommendations that stuck in my mind was What is it that makes people think that all the fundamental rights, human rights that we developed over more or less 7 decades in the analog world suddenly cease to be relevant in the digital world? Protection from harassment, hate speech, sexual exploitation. There are so many ugly things, as we know in today's world, happen on the internet. And yet for a while there was a fundamental conviction that actually no, you shouldn't interfere with that. The internet is beyond government. It's outside of, prescribing what is right or wrong. And as you know, human trafficking, the whole darknet, I mean, there are so many elements of that world that have emerged literally overnight. Elections are today manipulated. And I think we are also at this difficult stage where we have to acknowledge that when digital is so pervasive, what is the right balance between the freedom of an entrepreneurial approach to leveraging and using a technology and at the same time protecting individuals, protecting intellectual property, being able to create a consensus in society about what it is that we want to be, not just as a digital economy, but as a digital society, and ultimately what is the kind of development model that we envisage for ourselves. And that is a search that is happening across the world and in many ways fascinating for somebody who works in a development organization. This is no longer an issue that you define by very rich countries, very poor countries, developed versus developing. Some of the greatest frontier breakthroughs are happening not in the developed countries, which are far more stuck in legacy economies, they happen in developing economies. I spent 10 years living in Nairobi. You are all familiar probably with the digital finance revolution that Kenya went through. And I end with that one example in order to show to you what I hope our conversation today can be about. Not shadows, not risks only, but rather how you tackle the ambiguity of possibility, because this is what this age really represents to our societies. The reason why in Kenya, this M-Pesa platform, and can I assume everybody has heard of this? It's essentially the introduction of a smartphone as a platform which people could suddenly transact money. It was introduced by Safaricom, the local cell phone operator, and this is more than 10 years ago. And the reason they were allowed to do this, because normally what you cannot do in an economy, in our regulated economy, is that a cell phone company can suddenly have millions of dollars of people's money in overnight deposits. It's forbidden, right? Central banks don't allow this. You need a banking license. The central bank governor was somebody who at that time was very preoccupied with this issue of inequality, poverty, and exclusion. And he took a deliberate decision to allow Safaricom to have a regulatory freedom to retain overnight millions of dollars of people's small transactions, but they were in their millions over time, in order to see whether this would finally allow the unbanked to enter the financial system. And the story of Kenya and of M-Pesa has been remarkable because it literally brought everyone into a financial system, because in the past you didn't have an address, you didn't have a banking record, forget, you would never be able to borrow money. In Kenya today, a man or a woman going to the wholesale market at 6 in the morning can borrow money to buy the produce, take it to the village, sell it and repay that loan on their smartphone. 0 transaction costs. Artificial intelligence allows the financial system to simply operate like this. It is a revolution. For women also, particularly. So, let me end by saying the reason why wherever I travel right now, I look for the opportunity to meet with entrepreneurs such as yourself is to understand what is the smartest way to optimize the possibility of technology and yet leverage it also to optimize the outcomes in terms of a country's future development pathway, where technology is not an end in itself. And I assume many of you were also not born and were held in your mother's arms saying digital, right? I mean, you were not programmers by birth. You probably found yourself in a position where you had an idea, and digital, in the sense of a generic term, became a means to an end. UNDP maintains that view that in our societies we must always have a view of what end we have in mind, so that the means don't become the singular determinant factor. So with that, thank you so much for finding time to come here. I've read your stories already in some of the brief remarks here. I mean, they're amazing, and very much look forward to spending time with you today. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much. He already asked the question, so maybe I will just ask Donald to take the floor and deliver his speech while everyone can start thinking about the answer to those questions. So Donald, over to you.
Following your example, I'll try to do it from here. My name is Donald Wiharja. I'm heading the MDI, which is telecom corporate venture capital, but we are transforming it into a strategic venture capital to also manage not just telecoms investment, but also the state-owned enterprise. We have that mandate recently, as well as beyond that to other corporate that invest. As a venture capital, we basically channel money from the corporate to startups, to digital startups mainly, right? What I would like to say is digital entrepreneur, right? The one that knows how to embrace the digital transformation and bring it to its full potential, right? And we look at it also from our from the corporate point of view. We act as the bridge. That's why we want to call ourselves a strategic venture capital, because our unique selling proposition is we act as a bridge between the one that knows how to take full advantage of this digital transformation to the one that has the business opportunity. The state-owned enterprise, the corporate with the business opportunity, but also the Indonesian government. We do a lot of technological building technology solutions for the government as well, and being asked to help with all that kind of stuff. So I think I would like to tap into the innovation that the digital digital entrepreneur have, and bring it about to the business opportunity, the problems that we're trying to solve in our corporate and in our government, right? Also, one other thing that we are doing at the end of the year is we are launching an impact fund. And I think it is very much aligned with how we do things, as a VC in Indonesia. The VC and the digital ecosystem, the startup that we support in Indonesia is different than in the developed nations. It is very impactful. The digital startups are very impactful because the way the opportunity they can exploit is using digital to arbitrage and bring together small, medium enterprise and individuals, gig economy worker, and then empower them to challenge the established player, right? That's the opportunity that's available on hand. And that is why if you can see across the board on all the unicorns, there's always the small, medium enterprise and gig economy play in all of that, because that's how they challenge, like Blibli challenge maybe Ramayana in terms of selling, because they leverage the small, medium enterprise that they empower. So for us going into, and for a lot of my other colleagues in corporate venture, or in venture capital, going impact is just being able to bring the right labels in the beginning, bring able the right label, the right metrics to measure on something that we already do. But Mori also remind us, not all digital, not all gig economy is fair, right? It's the right kind of impact, right? You phrase it better than I do. But yeah, so that bring a thought, being able to measure it, being able to state what the concern is may be important. It is important to actually bring about the change that we want, right? It's not just employing as many possible contract workers, but making sure that they work. They actually is more sustainable, their life sustainable. So what we want is to build an impact fund that addresses small, medium enterprise, help them evolve and do their business, address education to make sure the working force is elevated to the level that be able to deliver the business opportunity that's on hand, affordable healthcare and impactful healthcare across the system, food security in terms of agriculture, and finally, as Indonesia goes from 4,000 GDP per capita to maybe 10,000 and get to be really up there, 10 trillion economy, put ourselves right in like 6th or 7th position in the world. We do it in a climately sustainable way as opposed to burn a lot of coals and have a huge negative impact on the world. So clean energy and climate tech is also very important to us. Hopefully, me and other VC like me that Indonesians digital investment in the last year finally exceeds Singapore at $12 billion investment. My fellow VC now very flush with cash, although we are very, very careful in deploying this year, sorry. We are in a position to make a huge difference. Hopefully, we'll be able to make the right difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow, it was fabulous. So you are having a tremendous influence on the ecosystem of creating digital startup. And that means, I guess, a person like Donald and the company would have enormous leverage on how to fix some of the anomalies or market failures, if I call it, or digital failures, if I call it, the fairness issue that you pointed out through your business in the future. So this is something that I see a tremendous potential. Thank you very much. It's not meant to be a panel discussion, okay? So let me just invite, may I call you Dita? To tell us a little bit about what you do through the Binar Academy. Thank you.
I feel peer pressure to also speak up there. All right. Yeah, maybe, hi everyone. Pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be among some of the most knowledgeable individuals that I've ever met and leaders in development sectors. My name is Dita. I'm the co-founder and Chief Business Development of Binar Academy. So for some of you who have never heard of us, we are the first Southeast Asia's learning super app that focuses on upscaling digital skills. So we help the next generation of digital talents to learn the skills that they need to enter the digital industry. And we also work with a lot of companies to empower their existing employees to be more digitally competent. So then, they can transition from quote-unquote conventional company to a more digital ones. So I built Binar Academy 5 years ago with two of my other colleagues that I met when I was working at Gojek, very early years at 2015. Back then, our product was just Go Ride, nothing much else, but it was very different lens. But the problem that we saw was it was very, very difficult for us to find digital talents. And, entrepreneurships and digital startups were propping up back then. Entrepreneurs were full of ideas, full of innovations, but unfortunately, there's nobody to execute it. We opened up what we call Gojek Tech Valley, where we train non-tech individuals to learn how to code. And some of them went on to become some of the most exceptional software engineers that we've seen at Gojek at the time. So then we thought, why don't we scale it up? Because there's a lot of startups out there struggling for the same thing, right? And we thought that it was such an important problem to solve because Indonesia has, is home to 12 unicorns, if I'm not mistaken, right? And thousands more with like smaller scale. And there was a survey that 30% of these startups are struggling in the human capital front. It's actually the second biggest issue that they face after funding. So Donald, maybe you can deploy a lot more funds to a lot more startups. But anyway, I think that's a really huge issue, right? And a lot of missed opportunities. And President Jokowi even said himself that Indonesia needed 9 million digital talents up to 2030. And currently we're just producing 1.1 million. So the gap is huge. And so our mission here is to close that gap. And, we wanted to also help contribute solving the SDG number 4, quality of education. And what we found is that the core issue of education, especially digital education, is fourfold. First is curriculum mismatch between what they taught in school and what the industry needs. Huge, huge gap. Second thing is learning engagement. IT is not the easiest thing in the world to learn. And it's very important for us to package the content in a way that it's not intimidating, that it's still very engaging and fun to learn. And the current school is not doing any of that. It's so focused on memorization, very one size fits all. And so we have a culture where students are very grades driven. I just want to be the first rank in class without really understanding the fundamental knowledge behind them. The third thing, despite the, I would say, questionable quality of the education system, it's very, very expensive. We had a discussion earlier during lunch. Only 38% of high school graduates continue to higher education, and some of that contributing factor was limited budget. And lastly, and what I think is one of the most unique problem for Indonesia is that laptop ownership is very low. Only 19% of households in Indonesia has laptops. So how do we even empower the next generation of digital talents if they don't even have the proper tools for them to learn how to code? And that's why Binar was born, and we wanted to solve all that problem, and that's why we collaborate with, all the unicorns out there with their employees to develop curriculum and update them periodically based on, the rapid changes of technological change. And then we also focus on changing the learning experience. What we call internally is we wanted to make learning as fun as watching Netflix and as fun as scrolling Instagram or TikTok feed. There's a research 4 to 5 hours of our lives every day is used to seeing all this content, imagine that 4 to 5 hours of your life is dedicated to learning something that dramatically improves your career trajectory and therefore your income potential. And to that, engineering and any tech jobs actually have the highest income potential in Indonesia, and I think the world as well, if not the highest. For example, a starting salary of an engineer is about $500, and while the average income monthly income is about $170. So starting salary of an engineer is about 3x higher than the average of other occupations. And that's a huge opportunity, right? Imagine people who are based in, in the Eastern Indonesia, if they have the skill with the work from anywhere arrangements that are now popularized thanks to the pandemic, they can cut the geographical, barriers, and take advantage of that, geographical arbitrage. They can stay there, get the income level as what Jakarta people get, and then develop their local economy from there, and they can also further become entrepreneurs and whatnot. And so that's something that we are working on right now. Unfortunately, education is one of the last sector that has been disrupted by technology. I think commerce was the first one, fintech, and then now education. And we still have a lot of challenges, but I'm happy to share that 40% of our current students right now coming from the second and third tier cities of Indonesia. So we are closer to, democratizing that access, making it accessible to everyone and opening opportunities for everyone. Some of the technologies that we have, maybe just, on the topic of gig workforce a little bit, we are currently developing a technology where, so we have the consumer app where the students can learn. And then right now we're developing a facilitator app where the experts can log in and get the questions and consultation requests and everything on their own phone. So imagine it's like Uber app or Gojek app where you have the consumer app and the driver app, right? So when we talk about gig economy, it often focuses on, what do you call it, like blue collar worker, like the lower skilled ones. But we wanted to create an ecosystem where gig economy or our gig workforce for experts are also enabled, because these people, I believe that the best knowledge is stored inside the head of all these experts that are just never gone public, never write blogs, never write books, but they have all the experience, all the knowledge in here. And how do we democratize and open the access to what's on their brain to like all the people across Indonesia, even those in the most remote areas. And this is something that we wanted to enable, because one way for us to make a social impact is not just always, through charity or like building technology, making these companies, but also, sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience. And that could be as noble as social giving as we could perceive it. I think I'll stop there. Thank you so much for having me, guys. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Dita. It's so encouraging to know that digital entrepreneur like her is consciously focused on social good. And certainly, I'm inspired about your app. So maybe I should start learning about these things as well. Our last speaker, Lisa, are you there online? Okay.
Yes, can you
over
hear
to
me?
you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I think good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm from Jakarta right now. My name is Lisa. I'm currently the CEO of Blibli. I would like to say a huge thanks to Global Chief UNDP, Mr. Achim Steiner, Mr. Didi as the head of UNDP Indonesia, and Mr. Nori Masa as well as the resident representative of the UNDP for Indonesia, and my fellow speaker, Pak Donald and Budita, such an inspiring speech. I've been listening very carefully, and I think you brought out a very colorful talent amongst the ecosystem. I would love to meet you in person somewhere if we have time. Again, I think I would like to very much thank you for the opportunity for me and Blibli at this prestigious event. I think I'm going to address firstly on Blibli's view on digital transformation. Today, Blibli ecosystem is much more than we started about a decade ago. We began surfacing individuals at the very beginning, but now I think we grew into institutions, including B2B and B2G as well. Our product offering is more than 20 categories, consists of groceries, consumer electronics, home and living, travel, lifestyle, and many more. Though we have done a lot, I think we continue striving to innovate to strengthen the sustainable plans. We are now entering the physical and digital world at the same time, where there is not physical world nor digital world in retail, but rather than integrated and connected one, the omni-channel per se. With the latest joint with Ticket.com, the Indonesia leading lifestyle platform and online travel agent, along with the acquisition of the ranch market, one of the Indonesian most modern supermarket chains that offer high quality and unique product through its more than 70 offline location across Indonesia. As part of our growing family, we're building the future-ready omni-channel commerce ecosystem. In our pursuit of providing a consistent good customer experience, it's logical for us to establish an end-to-end logistics and warehousing network powered by the latest technology to handle a fully fledged e-commerce market that was not existent before. Alongside our logistics partners, we partner with more than 30 of them. We also have our own in-house, which we call BEST, to provide last mile delivery capabilities that our reach expand to every corner of Indonesia. This day, we are proud to be pioneer and guaranteeing to our delivery and scheduled delivery to add convenience to our customer in over 60 cities across the nations. Our e-wallet ecosystem, BliPay and Blibli Pay Later, providing one of the industry most complete installment payment plans. We are now also proud to be pioneer in bank as service for full feature in the platform as part of the inclusive ecosystem as well. As we move further in bringing our superior customer-focused service from online to offline, and then from offline to online, we foresee most first-class experience with our brands require consistent innovation. We have definitely invested significantly in our technology, data analytics capabilities, and leveraging AI and ML at the same time. In Blibli, we also believe in many values of SDGs, reflecting in the way we do business to achieve the sustainable operations. We are one of the only majority Indonesian-owned platform amongst our significant peers. It is our responsibility to give back to our country and community. Our Gallery Indonesia showcase SMEs from the archipelagos, whom we are upskilling and also promoting. We are a strategic partner for Indonesian government in multiple impact programs, including Bangga Buatan Indonesia, Kampus Merdeka, and UMKM Hub. We are under our Blibli Cinta Bumi initiative. We're also ensuring that our box are PFSC and FSC certified cardboard. We are leveraging our reverse logistics to pick up waste material from our customer and convert it the used packaging material into filler material for the next order. We plant trees for every 10 boxes being returned to us and many more initiatives across the SDGs pillars. Blibli is committed to ensuring also gender equality among our workers. We are currently at the ratio of about 44 female and about 56% male, where about 36 of our female employees in strategic position across various department functions. I think all in all, I believe that our future presents many opportunities, and we definitely would love to be part of our next growth phase. And definitely with your support, we can build better future furthermore and collaborating more. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. This was also fascinating, and I must say I'm also learning a lot. And being a unicorn, I think there's also a level of corporate governance that they have invested in themselves. And this is something I'm sure all of you are also thinking, because you want to grow and become bigger. And this is something I'm just thinking that we may also think about how to work with the private sector to support you to get there. I'm mindful of time. I'm really sorry for this, but we still have about 10 minutes time. And I think Achim raised the question of like optimizing technology to optimize our contribution to future pathway for development, which is to say, how would you use your business model, digital technology, to make sure that there is a win-win for our society, for your business, and for our future generations? So I throw that general question to you, and maybe you might want to share your thoughts about it. Any of you? Maybe an elevator pitch, 45 seconds each. Kind of. Anyone?
Perhaps add a question, Laurie. Just, I mean, we've heard about two things right now: finance and human resources, skills. Are these the two most central challenges that you have faced in your business? Are there others? And is the solution to that something that involves the private sector doing something different, the financial sector doing something different? Is it a matter of regulations, incentives, tax policy? Because those are the lessons that we are learning across the world at the moment, that there is a regulatory environment, there is an economic, a financial environment, a skills environment, and how does one influence that? Because when you are an entrepreneur in a startup, the last thing you're going to be concerned about is how to change society, right? Because you're actually trying to survive with a crazy idea that nobody else thinks you're ever going to earn any money with. So I think we are learning so many interesting lessons right now about that critical phase, because once you are already a unicorn, you are much more in charge of your own destiny to some extent. But what is it that makes a country succeed with startups? Because there are many examples springing up around. I mean, on the African continent, I see at the moment many heads of state dreaming about that startup culture. Africa has an extraordinary amount of young people. And, there are ways in which these digital centers are being set up, hubs. And is that another way that one can promote perhaps learning from one another? The startup universe can perhaps teach itself best, but how do you create that kind of platform again? So these are just a few questions also. I mean, I just wanted to broaden it a little bit so you don't feel the burden of answering the problem of inequality when you are just one man or one woman and a dog, right, sitting there in the garage.
Anyone? Yes, please. If you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hello everyone, my name is Henry. I'm originally from Germany, but living since 6 years in Bali. I'm the CEO and founder of Scooty. We are worldwide the first public transportation company that is integrating roadworthy, that means designed for the main roads, electric stand-up kick scooters equipped with GPS to rent them out through an application. So we are trying to reduce traffic jam, noise, pollution, wasting of energy, and also lack of parking space. And as a startup founder in Indonesia by myself, I can confirm that the biggest problems are indeed financing, especially for a company like ours that heavily relies on scaling up quickly with a lot of hardware on the roads, but also human resources, because the idea of building up a startup in Indonesia compared to, I would say, the Western world is still quite new. So based on my experience and in my opinion, there's generally still a lack of experienced venture builders in Indonesia. Like in my case, for example, we are desperately looking for an Indonesian co-founder. Our entire upper management team is unfortunately international, which has also benefits, but we consider ourselves as an Indonesian public transportation company, so we really need someone with venture building experience in Indonesia. So, but then you also ask about other problems. So in my opinion, another big problem for many innovative startups is the field of law or regulations. My original background is actually law. So governments often wait until the innovation is already on the market before they slowly do something about proper supporting regulations. In my opinion, it would be good if governments worldwide, not just in Indonesia, are investing a bit more resources into legal departments and on the ministry level that are working together with innovators, with their research and development department, and have events like that, talking to startup founders and making the regulations before the startups are already successful. In my case, for example, if there would be already a regulation in Indonesia that's actually supporting e-scooters for the main roads, that would boost the whole industry, just as an example. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Hello, selamat siang. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tunga. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Perfect Fit. So we are a femtech startup. So if Dita said that education not really disruptive, I would say that feminine hygiene and health haven't been not many innovation in the field. So we are starting to work actually originally from Eastern Indonesia, where 2018 I started a social project in Flores, East Nusa Tenggara province, trying to solve the challenge of women and girls who cannot go to school, who cannot go to work because there's no supplies of good and affordable menstrual products, as well as toilets and education about their own bodies. So they don't know that how to manage their menstruation with dignity. So like working in that sector for 3 years, and now I'm realizing that it's actually, that's not just the issue in rural areas, but also we in urban, like Dita and I, it's so taboo to talk about our bodies, about reproductive health, and how come there's a lot of innovation in fintech and with the mobile app, but when we go back to our toilet, the product that we use for menstruation is still the product invented in the early 1900, which means during the World War. So, the sanitary napkins was like an old invention. So we are trying to disrupt the market with making the first Indonesian-made period-proof underwear, where you don't have to wear any pads, and it's the solutions for women and environment. And reflecting on the questions, how the digital transformation and the gig economy, and with the equality, because we started it in the eastern of Indonesia, where lack of technology and human resources to finally like pivoting as a startup. I would say gender issue, where like as a woman CEO is very daunting to actually like ask for capital, and it's very concentrated in Jakarta, where like we want to build a more equal society. So I also agree with the innovation and law, because like for a new product, usually you don't have the law, so it's very hard, to talk with the public, like how's the government supporting it. So I would say to make a transformation, it should be like a collaboration between like a VC and investor knows like how hard it is to like, let's say to make a profit in the beginning, and the government help with the regulation and the research and development department, and also the entrepreneur itself. Like for me, like we want to make impact as much as we could, but also at the same time we need to deliver like a profit. So it's really it's really good if all the ecosystem know that actually business doesn't have to only focusing on the profit. You need to make profit, but the profit needs to redistribute it again to invest in the worker, and to also create more equal society. So I would say like the fair pay, the fair compensation, fair contract, fair management and responsibility should always be like agreed by all the stakeholders. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm mindful of time. I think we have to close now, right? I'm looking at my... Okay, just one more person. Can you just... I saw the hand here first. So can you two discuss and then democratically agree who will speak? Okay, all right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I am Fajar. I am from Pendeka.id, the startup about empower the fisher group. We call digital fisher group. My question is, in Denpasar area, in my vision, we need digitalization in fishermen in mangrove or in rural area. But right now, still in Denpasar, in mangrove area don't have a connection in internet. I would say that lack on infrastructure. Uh, startup a startup ideally fast growth and using technology, but in my problem we have stuck on infrastructure in mangrove and the ocean. So what do you think in this problem? Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I am so sorry, but I cannot. I actually wish I could hear more from each of you because you all have stories to tell. But for the sake of just releasing Achim because he needs to go to another meeting, maybe I'll just ask him to I see time is up. Yeah, so let me just ask him to give us 1 minute feedback, and we close for now and take a family picture, right, by Didi? So Achim, over to you.
Well, let's make a promise on behalf of Nori. He'll come and visit you all, and we'll get some more inputs. But first of all, thank you. I mean, just first of all, I mean, our fellow panelists. I mean, amazing stories that you have told. And also from the comments that you just made, I think it is extremely interesting to spend more time understanding how we lower the threshold for startups to succeed. I mean, it is a Darwinist battle, right? And we lose so much possibility, first of all, and opportunity because the systems are just not set up. Whether it's the regulatory framework, I completely agree with you. I think governments are sleeping at the wheel. They're overwhelmed. I found it ironic that some of the major AI companies set up a non-profit in order to encourage governments to start thinking about regulation for AI. 6 years ago, I was then at the Oxford Martin School and was listening to these companies going around saying we need to get governments to regulate for this. This is serious, and it is in part because governments very often amongst their own professionals have no one who understands this universe. I mean, take UNDP even 5 years ago. There were a few geeks amongst us, right? But as an institution, we were miles away from understanding what it took to think about the future of development without having digital written all over it. So I think anticipatory thinking, critical, maybe a role that UNDP can help government with, but in a sense, there is, leaders in the sector. There are maybe business associations. I mean, there is an ecosystem in the world of business that one can also prime here. But that is partly the connectivity that I always look for in UNDP's work, because we can sometimes also bring to a country the top 10 examples we have learned in the world of how you can do this, right? How it has been done. And that helps government also to lower the learning curve, because you don't have to reinvent every basic legislation again. To the examples that you gave, not to reduce it to gender, but I mean, it's just such a fascinating example that you gave just now. This is 50% of Indonesia's population, and by any commercial business instinct, you would say this is a target group that, is so self-evident. And yet very often it is invisible in its distinct either needs or potentials, or indeed in its ability to perhaps access services. So I think we do need to be very clear that there is an enormous difference between men and women, girls and boys being able to access the digital universe. And this goes to the point, and I don't know whether in Indonesia it may sometimes be the case, but there are countries where girls between the age of 6 and 11 and 12 have complete access to a cellular phone and then get taken it away. Right? This is a fascinating dilemma now. Is this culture? Is it a transgression of a fundamental right to access to information? and being able to talk about it, being able to make this invisibility visible. I bow my head. I think you've done an amazing job in actually taking something that is so obvious when you spell it out as you did just now, but how many people thought of that, right, in terms of a digital universe? Then to your point, infrastructure, absolutely. I mean, in many countries, we are witnessing entire economies losing years in their ability to jump on digital platforms because government does not have the ability to understand that just like it built railways and bridges and power lines, putting a digital infrastructure in place is in fact a public sector responsibility or opportunity, right? You can then have business models, you can have public-private partnerships, but just like transition to electric mobility, to cleaner mobility, will not happen if you expect, 15 car companies who want to compete with each other to put the charging infrastructure in place, right? You save 10 years by putting that in place, and you save billions in terms of time lost that people spend in traffic jams, because you could actually have much less cars on the road, I mean, to your point again. So governments, and I don't mean this in any patronizing way, sometimes have become remarkably lazy in anticipating where technology is actually offering an extraordinary opportunity. And it's not just in the e-government service universe, right? I mean, that's one area where obviously a lot of things have improved in recent years. And we see many e-government platforms today fundamentally, transforming the experience of a citizen interacting with government. But it goes into the infrastructure. So when you speak to that particular issue of fishermen, for example, I mean, I don't have an obvious solution in my head, but just like, in the end, after the tsunamis of the past, the world came together and now you have a tsunami early warning system floating on the open oceans, right? It's doable, whether we work with satellite technology or under other means, but this is also, and I end with that, leaving no one behind. And sometimes, yes, the majority can afford to also co-invest in the ability for those who otherwise would be simply left behind, the fishermen's community, maybe girls in the education sector, to actually be given some support so that they can participate in that economy. Now, before I get cut off, I'll stop here, but I just want to say thank you so much for finding time to come together today. I think you do amazing work here, and colleagues, there is a community of us in the larger sense of millions around the world, right? And part of what I dream of sometimes as UNDP, if I could describe it as a startup, nobody will believe me, is to find that connective tissue, amongst so many of these ideas that, in a world of 8 billion people, we are running out of time to solve a lot of these things that, we now talk about every day. I've just spent a day and a half listening to the world's most powerful economists sitting there and describing the world's problems, but in many ways struggling to actually stand up and do something about it, And so let's make the bottom-up work. I think it's the only way we're going to get speed. So thank you very much, Nori. Wonderful idea.
Great. Thank you very much. I guess I will not try to speak after this, but just one thing I will promise, I will not leave you alone because I have many ideas of approaching you again to get if some of our work makes sense at all. So we'll be calling on you and asking for your opinion in the future. If you're available, that'll be great. So thank you very much from myself as well. And I'd like to give my microphone back to Pak Didi.
Yes, thank you so much, Pak Nori, for leading today's discussion. Yes, so the applause shows that how they enlighten the participants, as also I do. And of course, we would like to thank our insightful speakers, Pak Achim, Mr. Achim Steiner, Mr. Donald Wiharja, Ms. Dita Aisha, and also Ms. Lisa Widodo, who is joining online. And of course, to all our beloved participants. I aware that because of the limited time, we cannot have a further discussion, but as Pak Nori has promised, we will continue our communication furtherly. And of course, we now go to the next agenda for having a group photo. So outside of this meeting room. So first, let me invite our speakers and moderators maybe to go outside. And then we will have with all the participants to have photo together. Please follow the instruction of our crew. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of UNDP Indonesia, thank you once again for participating. Have a great rest of your day and your weekend. You can continue networking, especially if in this area if you like. And please don't forget to collect your merchandise in the registration desk. Thank you once again and have a very good afternoon. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for coming.